and something right, because I said, did I imagine this or not? So Nora, when she gets back, returns.
Right.
I mean, I've only gotten to read part of this because not all of it was out. She had a love of her life that something happened to.
Right.
So now the interesting thing was Honora's last name was Keeley, and she
Right.
married a Kelly. She was a Kelly and fell in love with a guy named Keeley, right? So
right.
I'm not crazy. I said, this is wild. So they could have been distantly related
Right.
anyway.
And
so how did that all
when
come
I
about?
did the research and the Keeleys, I found this wonderful group, this wonderful family out in Connemara, which to me is the most beautiful part of Ireland.
It's supposed to be like
It's
just
absolutely
gorgeous.
beautiful. And it's what you said before, these characters just talking. And this man showed up and I kind of said, what's your name? And he said, Peter Keeley. I said, okay, you're in the book. So, and also I always want to kind of go a little deeper to the heritage, and he is a professor, and some of the oldest stories in Ireland have been preserved in Connemara. The oldest songs, because it was the language Irish is still spoken out there as the mother tongue. I mean, as the main language.
Like a Celtic version.
Well, Irish Gaelic has many versions.
Right.
And then one of the Gaelic languages is called Irish. And people speak it as their first language.
Oh, okay.
So it's fascinating to be out there because
So what does that sound like? Is it way different than?
very different. There's a guttural sound to it. It's very beautiful. We went to Mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral yesterday. And
That was St. Patrick's Day, but this will air like 2 months later. But anyway, yeah.
Anyway,
we're in our green for that. Right?
and a tenor sang a song in the Irish language with that kind of very lilting, beautiful, spiritual, kind of even strange thing. And just hearing the words, it's a very spiritual moment.
Does it like envelop you sort of?
Yeah, it envelops you because it was the Druids. It's all the kind of wonderful other way of looking at the world that's there.
Yeah, there's so much more earth oriented and
Right.
and all the, it's probably more a little bit, I'm guessing, it's all the elements, so it's more native. It's almost like indigenous people.
It's indigenous, right?
Like indigenous.
And there's a great line that you can enter the other world in Ireland through a lake, through a well, or through a sudden insight. So it's almost like a meditative thing that the poets in Ireland never wrote anything down. They would make up their verses in quiet, in the darkness,
But
and
think
then
they'd
they'd
reach
speak
out to
them.
people.
Right, it was all oral. So there's still some of that in the language, and you can find that in Connemara.
Oh, that's very cool. So now this book ends when everybody starts making their way in the United States
That's
in
right.
Chicago. This book picks up on the granddaughter of
Honora,
Honora, which would be your great
aunt.
aunt.
Right.
Okay. So, and then just so you know, she went to Paris, like we said. She was with all these great writers and different people. She was a photographer. She comes back after the guy, there's like tragic stuff. Then there's a whole bunch of stuff happening here, even at the
Right.
beginning, which pulls her to stay, go, who to help, what to do, because she was...
When she gets back, there's a family crisis, but she decides to stay because my grandmother, and this is true, died very young and left 5 little children. And she became one of the caregivers for those children. But she also had a profession as a photographer. And in the way of Chicago, because she had a cousin who had a city job, all of a sudden she was hired for a city job. So, and I thought photography would be a good thing. As a photographer, she could observe what was going on. And I took poetic license with this, but she goes down to Miami to take a picture of the mayor of Chicago, Anton Cermak, greeting Franklin Roosevelt. Now, in real life, this happened in 1933, and as he was shaking hands with Roosevelt, an assassin missed Roosevelt by inches and killed the mayor of Chicago. And that really starts the story because her cousin Ed Kelly is appointed mayor of Chicago and then is reelected and serves 14 years. And during that time, he is a very important figure in the world. He saved Chicago.
Yeah, and Kennedys are involved.
The Kennedys are involved. He works with Franklin Roosevelt. He's very involved in the Second World War, is so is Nora. So through that relationship, I was able to look at a lot of things that happened in Ireland, and a lot of things that people don't really realize, like how Franklin Roosevelt's third term came about. There was a spontaneous demonstration in the Chicago Stadium that urged Roosevelt to run for a third term, which he did not plan to do, which would have changed everything. So, as you say, I could use Chicago history, but also the history of Ireland and the Kennedys, and the difference between Joe Kennedy, who I think was always uncomfortable with his Irish heritage, and Ed Kelly, who embraced it. And their friendship is very interesting. There was a lot of